Hey, what's up, everybody? So, I wanted to talk to you about this application that actually some of my students were using. I'm going to put all of the information right up here. The application is called Gamma. It's Gamma App. And it's fueled by AI, by artificial intelligence. And like ChatGPT, it's crazy, right? ChatGPT and Gamma application, you can say we can now use them in classrooms as teachers, and students can also use them um, to potentially make their work more, uh, I don't know, more effective, more awesome, right? Um, so I said, I'm gonna try it out, right? I'm gonna see what I can do with it. ChatGPT is a great tool, so I use it all the time. You can go to ChatGPT, just tell ChatGPT like, give me a description for a video, like whatever you want, and ChatGPT will do it for you. Gamma works so far. What I've seen, it works on a type of PowerPoint presentation, um, type of, I guess, how can you call it? Like this, like it will make you a PowerPoint presentation, basically. So it works on that basis. On PowerPoint presentation, there's a document option which I haven't tried using. ChatGPT can also write you like a 500-page essay on the American Civil War if you ask it to. Gamma, I'm thinking it can do that, but Gamma, I think you can also feed it documents and it may make a presentation based off the documents. And it has a third option. I don't know. It has a couple options, but okay. What I did today was, I registered. It's free, and obviously, if you want like more slides, like I think above 10 or 12 slides, you need to get the pro version. ChatGPT doesn't have anything like that. Or I think it does. I'm not sure. But there's like a lot of tools, a lot of AI tools. They're just not explored. So I wanted to talk to you about Gamma today, and what I did. So I went into Gamma, signed in. They ask you like, what are you gonna use it for? You just say like personal use, whatever, and and then it asks you like, what do you want, right? So then I was just like, can you make me a presentation talking about psychology and philosophy, right? Because those are the topics that I mainly discuss on, in my videos. So here we go. Introduction to Psychology and Philosophy, exploring the fundamental concepts and principles of psychology and philosophy. Okay, so we have an image on the right side, which we have a couple of books there, Logic and Math. We have Nietzsche. We have Heidegger. I see Hegel, Kierkegaard, Sartre, right? Sartre is there. Being and Nothingness is there. And Being and Nothingness is actually a philosophy book, which I started to read. I mean, I've read about philosophy. I actually studied 3 semesters of psychology in the university. I didn't finish my psychology career, and I took a course on logotherapy. So I did complete that course. Um, with regards to philosophy, I mean, I just like thinking about it, and I like to hear the ideas, but I've never studied like a philosopher or philosophy officially. So I think psychology is kind of like my strong one compared to philosophy. But the book Being and Nothingness is actually a book that I've read. I haven't finished it. I printed it out. It's on PDF. You can find it on Google. But what I did is I started to read it, and then one day I went out to eat tacos with some friends, and I left my backpack stupidly in his car, and someone smashed the window and took my backpack and took my book. It's so stupid because in the backpack, I didn't really have anything. I just had some pens, some paper, some sheets of paper. I had a very nice coat that I was wearing that day that I took off because it was getting kind of hot, and I had my Being and Nothingness by Jean Paul Sartre, and yeah, these motherfuckers just took the book and I guess like did off with it. I don't know what and I haven't printed it since then. But I'll get back into it. It's a very dense book. I mean, the ideas in it, they're awesome. He talks about time, about being, about nothingness. But it's very dense topics. I've read Sartre also, but like more of his easy books, like The Nausea, like my favorite book of all time. And but those are more like storybooks with a philosophical twist in it, right? Okay, let's go to the next slide. And so here, I guess AI will put like a picture, like it has here on the left side, History of Psychology, Antiquity to Modernity by Hardy Lee. I don't know who that is. Okay, let's start. The history and development of psychology, early beginnings. Psychology's roots can be traced back to ancient civilizations and philosophical inquiries into the nature of the mind. Yes, that is true. Psychology, I guess, starts like with ancient civilizations, like primitive civilizations, right? Kind of like in the esoteric touch. And yes, philosophy, you could say, is the father of psychology because you start to question yourself. What is life? What is this that we're living in? What is my mind? What are my thoughts? You start to question all these things, and thanks to questioning the nature of your mind, you're able to kind of like officiate that into more scientific terms, which is actually how psychology is born. So it says here, emergence as a discipline. Oh yeah, and just something about the ancient civilizations. We could talk about the Buddhist, the Taoist, the Indians, right? Like there's a lot of the Aztecs. I think the Toltecs were the ones that had a little bit of this type of philosophical bent to them. The Egyptians, and I think with the Toltecs, with the American primitive civilizations, there's a book called the Four Agreements, right? Los Cuatro Acuerdos, I think by Miguel Ruiz or something like that. So if you're interested, you could look into it like that. So emergence as a discipline, the formal establishment of psychology as a scientific discipline began in the 19th century with Wilhelm Wundt, often considered the founder. Yes. So it's very interesting to see how psychology actually emerges from real doctors, right? So they weren't just like some crazy loony people out there or philosophers smoking the peace pipe. These guys were doctors. They were serious doctors that started to see, just coincidences with the mind, with their patients, with the brain, with how their, with how the body function. Wilhelm Wundt and I think Watson, I think it's William Watson, if I'm not mistaken. William Watson and Wilhelm Wundt were the first people that basically said, yes, we're going to make psychology a discipline, right? I believe they were even before Freud and Carl Jung and them, right? The psychoanalyst. So yeah, they emerge, they start to do experiments. I don't remember if Wilhelm Wundt did some experiments. I think he's the one. No, that was Ivan Pavlov, but he's in it. Pavlov was Russian, and he's the one that experimented with dogs with salivation. So he's the one that developed the theory, which was actually a precursor of behaviorism, right? Which is also a school of thought in psychology, which says that you can be conditioned to do anything, right? Or you do things because you're conditioned to do them. So everything can be explained with external like stimuli, right? So in psychology, you have like the fight of, everything can be explained with external reasons, with external causes, and then you have the people that actually dive into the mess of the mind, right? So Wilhelm Wundt and Watson and Pavlov. Pavlov is the one that said, just to kind of explain that experiment, um, he would he had a dog, and he would feed the dog steak, like a nice piece of food that the dog liked. And every time that he would feed the dog, or before feeding the dog, he would ring a bell, right? Like tick, 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 tick. So he would ring the bell and the dog would come. And the next day, the same thing, ring the bell, the dog would come and eat the food. Bell, food, bell, food, bell, food. And each time the dog came, the dog would salivate, right? Like, because the dog was hungry, it knew it was going to eat. So then what Pavlov does is, once the dog is ready to eat, he rings the bell, but this time he doesn't have the food, but the dog is still salivating, right? He's been conditioned. So there's this whole theory about how you have a dependent variable and independent variable, right? Like in this case, I believe the dependent variable to have the certain the stimuli, right? No, it's called the dependent cause or something like that, because it's all about cause and effect, right? So the dependent cause or the dependent variable, something like that, is the food, right? That's what conditions you, or conditions the dog initially. But then after that, the bell is the independent variable, which then if you take away the independent variable, you still have the independent variable, which is independent from the situation, but is now affecting the situation, right? You're getting a result thanks to that cause, thanks to that independent variable, right? So it's very interesting. And then there's Skinner, who comes after that, and then he takes that to a whole nother level, right? With the, I think it's called operant conditioning, and Pavlov is classical conditioning, right? So we learned all about that in the first 3 semesters of psychology that I took. And then we have school of thought. Psychology has evolved through different schools of thought, such as structuralism, functionalism, and behaviorism. Yes. So even psychoanalysis, and if you look up, if you want a psychologist, for example, many psychologists will say, what their specialty is. So they'll say, right now there's a lot of cognitive behaviorists, cognitive psychologists. There's also psychoanalysts. The bad psychoanalysts are more interesting, but the bad thing about them is that you will have to go to therapy for probably years, because it's a very slow therapy working with psychoanalysts. I mean, you're really going to get into your childhood, into your traumas. And it's basically the psychology for like rich, old people, right? That just have the money and the time to do that. Um, but there are other ones more effective, like the cognitive behavior one, structuralism, functionalism. I have to look into that. I'm not really sure what that is, but structuralism kind of sounds like constructivism. I don't know if that's the same one. Constructivism is basically like you construct the knowledge, right? So there's all these theories behind all these schools of thought. And yeah, psychology nowadays is very, very diverse. Okay, let's go to the next one. Key concepts in psychology. We have first the consciousness, right? The state of being aware and perceiving one's surroundings. Yeah, we learned this right off the bat in school. So consciousness is when you're awake, when you're alert. It's basically it's called actually alert, right? Which is when you're awake, right? So when you're awake and your mind is observing everything, and your 5 senses are functioning, you see, you hear, you smell, you all of that stuff, you're aware. The opposite of that is being asleep, or just being knocked out, or whatever. That's the opposite, right? Behaviorism, yes, like I just mentioned, Pavlov, Skinner, the study of observable behavior and its influence on learning and motivation. Yes, behaviorism is basically how you train a child or a dog or an animal, right? So it's a reward system. You want them to do this, and if they do it, you give them a prize, you give them a reward. And if they don't do them, and if they don't do that, then you punish them, right? And you can reward them in 2 different ways. You either take away something they don't want, like less homework, or you give them something they want, like candy. And you can punish them the same way. You can punish them by giving them something they don't want, right? Like more homework, or by taking away something that they want, right? Like I'm gonna take away your cell phone or your toy, right? If you don't do that. So that's positive, negative, reinforcement or punishment. You know that's all really interesting if we get into it, and that's how you condition kids to behave, animals to behave, and motivate them, right? Like the motivation, the problem with behaviorism is that all of the motivation is external. So if you were to leave them by themselves, like let's say you want them to do their homework, and you're not there to effectuate that reward system or that behaviorism, um, then they don't do it, right? They don't have what's called internal motivation, right? They just have instrumental motivation, which is like, I'm doing it to get that piece of candy, or I'm doing it so I don't get my phone taken away, right? Um, but yeah, very interesting. Okay, cognition, the mental processes involved in acquiring, storing, processing, and using information. Yeah, so cognition is basically all of your mental processes, like how is it you learn? We have, for example, we have three types of basic memory, which is the long-term memory, the short-term memory, and the working memory. The working memory is like the memory that you're using right now to remember what I just said, like these last couple of seconds. But then you have other types of memory, right? Like the semantic memory, which is related with meaning, the sequential memory, right? Like all these type of, so also how you learn. Attention is very interesting to study attention, what you focus on, how you process that information, how you associate like this new content to old content, how you use the information, how you retrieve that information, how you recall information. Okay, and developmental psychology, the study of how and why human beings change over the course of their life. Wow, that's that I would say that's probably one of the most interesting things that you can study if you study psychology, developmental psychology. You have from Freud, basically the stages in a child's life, like from I think it's from the anal stage to like all the way to the genital stage, which is when they hit puberty. Piaget also studied kids from the physical motor perspective to the social to I believe the emotional or cognitive uh, levels, right? Like how they develop. Freud and Piaget, I think they have four stages. Yeah, like Piaget has the sensi motor one, all the way to I think the abstract one, which is when the child hits like 17, 18 years old. But personally, the more interesting ones for me is like Eric Erickson's uh, developmental psychology, which that basically covers from the moment you're born until you're like 90 years old, right? And he also talks about how you go through these stages, how there's a battle, right? Like when you're a teen, you want to identify yourself with some group of people, right? So you look for identity. But it's very interesting, like when you're a child, you go through these stages. As an adult, you also go through these stages. This is where I found the information on the zodiac, and the zodiac also has its developmental stages, which is related to psychology. It has nothing to do with prediction or I'm going to tell you your future or none of that stuff, right? It's very interesting. Okay, so major theories in psychology. Yes, we have the psychoanalytical or the psychoanalytic theory, focus on the role of the unconscious, yes, and childhood experiences in determining personality and behavior. Yeah, so the psychoanalysts basically try to figure out what you're hiding, right? Like if you tell them I have this problem with my boss, they'll think it's because you really have a problem with your father or your mother, right? They'll tap into your dreams, your unconscious, your childhood traumas, experiences, and that's ultimately what needs to get fixed first before you deal with this superficial problem of your boss, right? We have the humanistic psychology, emphasizes the study of the whole person and the uniqueness of each individual. Yes. So here we have people like Carl Rogers, where they talk about, and Maslow, Maslow's pyramid, where they talk about how you need to develop as a human being. And through the development, through your growth and maturity, is how you're going to feel better. The humanistic approach, yes, it has more of a heartfelt approach, right? Also, the holistic approach, right, which tries to take into consideration everything, and it's more human, right? They're not saying you're traumatized by your childhood. Here, they're actually like, more human, I guess. Yeah, that's the humanistic psychology, where a lot of institutions nowadays, like universities and hospitals and places like that, they say they have a service and humanistic approach, and their vision and their mission statements are and their values are based on humanistic tendencies or philosophies, right? And then we have the cognitive one, which is the one I said is the most popular nowadays, explores internal mental processes, including problem solving, memory, and language. Yeah, so this one tries to, I think one of the psychoanalysts, but that's more psychoanalyst, Alfred Adler, who focused on power and responsibility. I think one of the way he would start his therapy would be, you come to me and you talk to me about your problems, and I tell you, yes, none of what you're telling me is your fault. It's all, your parents, society, your friends, your circumstances, life, God, whatever. And then as the therapy progresses, what he would try to do is he would try to get you to accept the responsibility at the end. Like, it's all your responsibility, right? So it was kind of interesting. The cognitive one has to do more with just basically focusing on the memory and solving the problems that you have superficially, right? Okay, so let's go to Introduction to Philosophy. Metaphysics investigates the nature of reality, existence, and the relationship between mind and matter. Yeah, so this is basically like, you think you have it all figured out when you say, yeah, I'm living my life, I go to my job, I wake up, whatever. But then when you start to question, you know, what is a job? Can you define beauty? You enter like all these different types of variations, or it could your a job could be defined as a place you go to, but it could also be defined as the activity you do to make money. Or it could be, and you just start like coming up with all these type of different ideas. Philosophy is it's an activity that is at its best when it's done with people, right? Because the different ideas you have. But you can also do it by yourself. You just grab an idea, just grab a topic, whatever it is. Paper. What is paper? So it's almost like poetic. Um, and the relationship between the mind and matter, right? Just like, what is mind? What is your mind? What is matter, right? And the relationship between that. What is time? What, just all those type of questions. Epistemology, concerned with the study of knowledge, including its nature, sources, and validity. Yes, epistemology, I remember taking a couple courses on uh, scientific epistemology. So it's theory, right? And it basically deals with the root, like, where does all this information come from, right? Like, the source, and how valid is it really, right? And ethics examines concepts of right and wrong, moral duty, and the moral consequences of actions. Yes. So I took a couple courses on ethics also, professional ethics, right? Any type of career, you need to look at ethics, because you need to know how to act right when you're working, right? So ethics is the study of moral, of right and wrong, of all these ideas, right? And then moral is, what everybody thinks is right and wrong, but it depends, because that's going to be according to the culture, to the moment in history, right? Excuse me. So yeah, but you have all these dilemmas where basically, you enter in conflict whether you're thinking about the now or the future, right? Like, would you kill one person to save five, or would you kill five people to save one, right? And those are like extreme examples, but when you're in life, you face these ethical issues, right? Like, I just saw someone do something wrong. Do I tell my boss, or do I just ignore it, right? What if that leads to something worse? What if that affects me? What if it doesn't? Does that make a difference, right? Like, so all these ideas are part of the study of ethics. And we have branches of philosophy. Metaphysics explores the fundamental nature of reality and existence. Yes, anything that's meta is above it. It's above that thing. So it's if we have physics, which is like the physical realm, metaphysics, it means that it's above the physical, right? So it's like the study of the spiritual, we can say. Theology would also come in here. Epistemology investigates the nature and scope of knowledge and belief. Yeah, so epistemology, the source, where does all this information come from? And logic concentrates on the principles and criteria of valid reasoning. Logic is very, very interesting. So in logic, they basically teach you how to reason. I've read a couple books on logic, and they're some of my favorite books. Yeah, so they basically explain, like, if this is true, then this is false. If this is true and this is true, then this is true, right? So you work with sentences, with grammar, with syntax, and the fallacies is where it really gets interesting, because fallacies are, logic deals with trying to make everything valid. And what does valid mean? Valid means that it's true, right? So you want the truth. You use logic to get to the truth, right? And fallacies are statements or sentences or arguments that appear true, but if you really analyze them, they're false, right? They're not true. They're invalid. It's invalid reasoning. So logic deals with how you reason, and if you're reasoning correctly or not, right? It's very interesting. Logic. Okay, key concepts in philosophy. Rationality examines the role of reason in understanding reality and making decisions. Yes, so rational, we're rational beings. And how is it that you understand reality? How is it that you perceive reality? Because it's different for everybody, supposedly, right? So, how do you view reality? What's your, they call it no, there's a, what's your macro vision, or no, it's a cosmovision, I think. What's your cosmovision of the world, right? How do you view money? How do you view work? How do you view family? How do you view relationships? How do you view yourself? How do you view, like, just basically, and how does that affect your decisions? See, so this is like a precursor to psychology. Free will explores the extent to which individuals have control over their actions and choices. Yes, so free will and ethics, for example, go hand in hand, because you have free will to do things, but then does that also mean you have a responsibility to act right? Right? Um, you know, is not knowing justifiable when you do something bad? Is that a justifiable excuse? Like, well, I didn't know. I didn't know I was doing wrong. Many people say it is. So then they say ignorance is the true evil, right? But you have free will. So if you have free will, you know that you have a responsibility. And this is often taught in schools, because many people don't know that. And once you know it, it's like a curse, because you can't escape from it anymore. Once you know that you have free will, and that implies you have responsibility, you can't escape that, because now your actions are always supposed to be deliberate, and you're supposed to think twice before doing things, right? And morality involves the study of principles concerning human conduct and values. Yes. So what does society value, right? Why is there peace? Or why is peace the objective of society, right? Tranquility, because that way we can live better as human beings. What do we value? We value respect, honesty, responsibility, hard work, right? the study of the moral values, right? I want to make it clear that moral values are not the same as just your values, because you can value TV and video games, but those are not moral values, right? And a lot of people often say values, right? Respect, blah, blah. No, those are not values. Those are moral values, right? So just to make that point clear. And the last one, the relationship between psychology and philosophy. We have the intersection of the mind, explores the common ground between psychological and philosophical inquiries into the nature of the mind. Yes, so the mind is basically playing a huge role in both disciplines, right? Because there's idealism at its, you know, taken to its farther extent, which is basically like nothing real exists. It's all in your mind, right? What is reality? Does reality even exist, or is it just all a dream? Are you in the dream? Are you dreaming? And when you go to sleep, do you wake up? Or when you die, you actually wake up from this dream, right? Like, uh, so we have that. And interdisciplinary approach, psychology and philosophy collaborate in exploring existential questions and understanding human behavior. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we try to have the existential questions so we can try to better understand behavior. In psychology, the big question is, why do people do the things they do, right? Why? So why do you go to work? Why do you have that problem? Why do you react that way? Why are you sad? Why are you angry? Why are you happy? Right? And interdisciplinary is where it gets really interesting, because you can then take, like, for example, psychology and philosophy, I think both are guilty of this. They've taken like quantum physics, and they've integrated those ideas into philosophical and psychological ideas, right? Like, since in quantum physics, you can affect something that's, not near you. That means that you can do that with your mind, or, that means that you can really do that, so that would be like psychology and philosophy respectively. Yeah, but there's ideas like, for example, the dynamic systems theory idea, which basically says that everything is dynamic and it's complex, right? Like, it's not as simple as I do this because of my childhood, or I do this because I feel this way. Like, it's complex. And for me personally, mm, this is where psychology can take on a completely sociological perspective, right? Because people influence us, society influences us, the culture influences us. So that's where you get like people like Vygotsky, where they basically say, you are the way you are because of society, and there's a big debate in these type of humanitarian sciences like psychology, philosophy, language, which is the nature versus nurture debate, right? Like, are you the way you are because of your genes, because of what you're carrying inside you? Are you predisposed to be this way, like naturally, or is it nurture? Is it how your parents brought you up, how your mom took care of you, what she taught you, what your dad taught you, what your friends taught you, what you've seen in your society and your culture, right? And of course, there's people that say, well, it's 50-50, it depends, it's both. But that's not that. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say it depends or it's 50-50. That's not good science, they say. If you want to do good science, you need to take on a side and you need to argue for that side, right? Even if you're wrong, even if the other person arguing for the other side is going to disprove you, you still need to argue for it, because that's how you make good science, right? Like, Skinner versus Chomsky, right? Like, Skinner was all about behaviorism, all about the way you are is because of your external circumstances, because of how you were brought up, nurture. And then you had like Chomsky, who was all like, no, it's because of your genes. You have a language acquisition device in your head. There's universal grammar, and that's how you make good science, right? Like the people that say 50-50, we don't know about them. Nobody's talking about them. They're not authors, they're not known. So, but we're talking about these two people because these two authors and theorists, because they took on a side and they say no, things are like this, right? And they may be wrong, they may be right, they may have some things right about them, some things wrong about them, but that's how you make good science, right? By focusing on an approach. Personally, I've always been more of a nurture guy, right? I've always been more of it's the social context, it's your conditions. I don't believe a lot in like the DNA and the genetics, because for me the ultimate argument is epigenetics. Even your genes change based on your context, right? And that's called epigenetics. So that was like my final argument for that debate. Yeah, so I think Gamma is a pretty cool tool to use. I may use this for future presentations. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. And I guess that's all for this video. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.